I'm not going to address exactly what he did before or after he was talked with his lawyer. He knows that there are certain things that are on the table, and if he wants to, in fact, engage with us in a productive manner, there are ways that he can do that.
Any criminal lawyer has to tell him he has to be quiet. He has to shut up until months from now, maybe years from now, they come forth with a deal saying, well, if you'll tell us who your handlers were, who the other people were, we will limit your charges. We should have held him as an enemy combatant, tried him under the military commissions.
Well, U.S. officials say the 23-year-old Nigerian Umar Farouk Abdul-Muttalib was talking to American authorities before he was given a lawyer, and then he stopped talking. There are still obviously questions about how he was able to board that plane 10 days after that failed attempt. But now there are questions about whether he should be charged as a criminal or an enemy combatant, as you heard on the Sunday talk shows. We're back with the panel. Steve.
Well, I thought Brennan's statement was rather stunning. I mean, here you have a guy who, but for a faulty detonator, would have killed 300 people on Christmas Day, and we are talking about a plea bargain. And, you know, one of the things I think you have to do is stop and think about exactly what a plea bargain means. It's, you know, it's not sort of a notional plea bargain, of some vague plea bargain. It's actually trying to entice him to tell us what he knows by giving him things, by giving him leniency, potentially, or giving him years off, giving him a better jail cell. We are actually going to be negotiating potentially with somebody who tried to kill 300 people on Christmas Day. I find that absolutely stunning. But the bigger problem for me is, what aren't we learning from him today? What don't we know that we might have otherwise learned? I mean, he told the FBI, apparently, that he knew of others who were being sent to the United States. Who were they? Where were they trained? What techniques were they going to use? Were they trained in other techniques? There's a battery of questions that we could have asked him and could be asking him right now if we hadn't read him his rights. But now, all we're going to get from him in response to those questions is silence, because we've told him that he has the right to be silent, which I think is rather amazing.
AB, the political fallout here. What about this? Brennan said on Fox News Sunday, there isn't an upside or a downside to this decision. It's the decision we made.
Because it had been already made. Yeah. And he can't argue that it would have been wrong to treat him as an enemy combatant. I think this is going to be very tough for Democrats to swallow, the idea that we are, as Steve is pointing out, plea bargaining with and making offers to a terrorist. I think when you see members return, that decision has been made, but the decision on Guantanamo is an open question, and so that's why you're going to see, although that they can't, Democrats in Congress can't reverse the White House's decision, you see Senator Dianne Feinstein, Congressman Thompson, Congresswoman Harman, and Democrats on the intelligence committees who are their party's experts saying we have to halt these transfers of detainees from Yemen back to Yemen. I mean, we can't move them from Guantanamo back to Yemen. They will not be held there. And so while it might be a possibility to keep them in the facility in Thompson, Illinois, while some of them may disagree with plea bargaining, I think that Guantanamo is going to be where the party comes down.
If Abdul-Muttalib, Charles, said to the FBI or whomever that there's a long line of others like me, it is disconcerting if he's not talking now and can't tell us about the line.
It's beyond disconcerting. It's insane. Here's a guy who, as Steve has said, the administration has admitted was trained, armed in Yemen, recruited in London. We closed our embassy this week, presumably because there are active threats emanating out of al-Qaeda, the same people who are involved in his mission. Here's a guy who presumably knows stuff. At least he knows who trained him, who armed him, and who was around him. He said that there are other plots. The idea that you give him his rights is simply unbelievable. And it isn't as if you have to decide in advance that he'll get a civilian or a military trial. You can seize him now as a military combatant, as just about everybody in Gitmo was, and later decide if you want to put him in a civilian court or a military one. You don't have to decide that now. I prefer a military, but it's irrelevant. The question is, how do you hold him at the beginning when you need information? And to give him a lawyer and to know he's going to shut up and not say anything, and you give him chits with which he can bargain, is absolutely unbelievable. And this is what shows the unseriousness of this administration and war on terror. It's not that a guy slipped through the cracks. There are mistakes that have been made in the past. which allowed a guy on an airplane. Well, that can happen. It's a complex bureaucracy. The unseriousness is not how he got on the plane. The unseriousness is what happened after, and the reflexive reaction of this administration, which instantly gives him a lawyer, a guy who isn't entitled to any protection, a Geneva Convention or U.S. Constitution.
Much more on this, I assure you. That's it for this panel, though. But stay tuned for some very cautious weather reporting.